All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this year career panel. My name is Erwin Lares. I work for Research Cyber Infrastructure at Do It, and I am the person behind the Data Science Platform Service. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce our panelists. We have a nice balance of people, both from UW-Madison and from industry. And from UW-Madison, we have Carolyn Wilson, and I'm going to tell you a few things about Carolyn that I have in my cheat sheet here. She goes by Carolyn. She currently works at UW-Madison as the manager for the job rotation program, IT track. And this is a fantastic program that let new professional experience work around campus. This program supports early career professionals also in HR and finance. She has provided HR support and hiring for IT for about 5 years. The next person, also from UW-Madison, is John Caskey. He's a data engineer at the ICU Data Science Lab, and he has been working there since its founding for over 5 years. His work in the lab includes a variety of roles, including DevOps, cloud engineering, system administration, data science, and working both as a lead and collaborator when building out. All right, so I was telling you about Mike and the fact that he co-authored 10 publications and 8 patents in areas of protein engineering, chemical biology, and application of machine learning to molecular design. And with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit of what is the dynamic we're going to follow. I have a series of questions that I'm going to present to the panel, and I would like each of them to answer the questions as they see fit. Hopefully, we will have an organic discussion. And after we're done with the scripted questions, I will open the floor for you to ask questions to the panelists. Does that sound good? And with that, let's just jump into our first question. So, panelists, could you please describe your current role in data science or adjacent to it? What kind of things do you do on an average day? And what do you do the most time? What do you spend the most time doing?
I can start us off. So again, Carolyn Wilson here at UW-Madison in the job rotation program. I'm the program manager for the IT track specifically. So I'm working with early career professionals, which typically means like just graduated. This is their first full-time role after completing college or their education, or maybe a year or two in their field, but still very new to IT in general. So a lot of my work is, recruiting those people. We do have people go through the program in a cohort model. So you're not alone, you're with a lot of other people, but recruiting, supporting those early career professionals and basically helping them to find what areas of IT are they're most interested in, to, take what your education knowledge is and actually apply it into real work experiences. So going to 4 different IT units on campus. So a lot of partnering with those units, making sure that they have interesting work, they have the capacity to have an additional person on their team. And then my role is just, again, to support, help them find their career path, what they're interested in, what they're not, and learn a little bit more about the IT field as a whole. So yeah, a little bit about me.
Yeah, so maybe I can go next. First, I want to thank Sarah and Chris and Erwin for inviting me to be on the panel, inviting me from off campus to participate in the Bazaar. So it's been really great. So I'm Michael Killoran. I'm actually in the AI molecular design team at Promega, which is a local biotechnology company. I'm a research scientist there and a project leader. And so my role is really creating new proteins and chemistries for life science researchers in both academics and industry. So I guess what a typical kind of day looks like for me is that there really is no typical day. Maybe to use a data science term, I can give you an average, but there's a huge standard deviation. So, I've been really fortunate in my role to, guide my career at Promega for the last 10 years, really along a trajectory that, aligns with my interests and what I want my role to be like. So I kind of split my time between, I guess, management leadership roles as well as actually doing experimental work in the laboratory, because that's really important to me still. So the kinds of things I'm doing in a typical day are, managing ongoing protein design projects, managing people, reading and researching the scientific literature, doing experiments in the lab, scripting, writing code, creating models, presenting to collaborators, business partners. And so, all of those sorts of things on maybe a daily or weekly basis tend to happen in kind of sprints. If we're coming up on a deadline for a patent or an important product launch, I'm doing far more, meetings and presentations versus if we're launching a new project in the lab, you're programming robots, you're collecting a lot of big data sets and you're training models on those. And that's a really exciting time too. So overall, that kind of comes to an average, but there tends to be different seasons throughout the year where my role can change quite a bit. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Caskey. I'm a data engineer at the ICU Data Science Lab. I want to thank Sarah, Chris, and Erwin for the opportunity to speak. It's a great opportunity. And there's many of the folks at many of the folks here. There's a great group of people. You'll have a great conference. Similar to what Mike said, there really is no typical day. Every day there's a lot of different things that I have to tackle. When I first started in the lab, one of the big challenges was getting our on-house compute servers up and running, which meant I had to research the software and also work very closely with our IT department. So that I could basically set up our compute servers, manage them, but also have them not just that they're up and running, but they're easy to use, and also like doing things like create documentation for the lab members. Other things like I'm a great resource for the lab members for code review, and R, Python, C++, CUDA, whole 9 yards. So a lot of what I do is help support other researchers when they're doing projects. Another great opportunity I have in the ICU Data Science Lab is leading projects myself, whether it's a piece of a larger project or just kind of taking the leads and a project that leads to a publication. That's one thing to like about this. The field is constantly changing, which is its own challenge, but I love learning new things. I love just constantly having to look at new techniques and either create new approaches, methods, but also just optimize them and figure out the best way to tackle any things that come our way.
Yeah, thank you, John. If I can go back to Caroline. Caroline, can you tell us what you see when you answer the questions? What you see the people you support, if you can talk from their point of view, that will be, I think, very helpful.
Like what the rotators experience is like, do you mean?
Right. If you see the people you support, what do you see them? What would you describe their role in data science? What do they spend the most time doing? If you have any insights, you can share those.
Yeah. So rotators are what we call employees in the program. But I would say, again, they kind of, because the style of the program is that they get to experience 4 different IT areas on campus. It's a little bit like, some rotators do go through a data science rotation if that's something they're interested in. Others, may never go through that depending on their interest. But if they do go into data science, I know Erwin partnered with us as well, so he also had an employee on his team. But I would say a lot of the data science work can vary quite a bit. Whether it's some have used more like data visualizations and using like Tableau, or some are cleaning data sets, or we have a rotator who's working within a customer relationship management software and doing a lot of data pulls on, funding and donations and organizing all of that. So there's a lot of varieties. Every unit has different platforms that they use and different processes, but I don't know, is that helpful, Erwin?
Yeah, for sure. And back to Mike and John, my last question was, what do you spend the most time doing? I don't think I quite got that from you both.
Yes, I could jump in. I would probably say communication is probably the biggest thing that I spend my time doing. A large part of working, I think, in industry in biotechnology is teamwork-based projects. Often that, is everything from having meetings, deciding plans, planning out, experiments to, having meetings about business strategy. We're oftentimes interacting with collaborators in academia and industry in a variety of capacities. So that ends up being a huge part of the role. And I think something that maybe as a career, as a skill set, is something that we're often looking for are people that are both technically very good in their role, but then also have the ability to communicate really well, to be a good team member, because I think that is a huge part of what we spend a lot of our time doing.
Similar to what Mike said, communication is a big portion of it. Since I'm working on several projects at once, and sometimes I have some projects that are dedicated for me, but a lot of times I'm working with other team members, so communication is very critical. If I show up to any given meeting, it's expected that I'll know like what's the status of the experiment, what's the latest results, not just the results, but what does it mean within the context of how much progress have we made, or has our hypothesis been proven, disproven, things like that. Data cleaning actually in this job also takes a big chunk of time. And early on, one of the things I had to do was build several libraries, some of them just from scratch, because we were in our lab, we worked with a lot of unstructured patient data, which is it's its own challenge, but tends to be very messy. And so just kind of building tested reproducible workflows that can do that. That's another big portion of time. And the third one is just basically research, staying up to date on the latest publications, because like I said, the field's constantly changing. And so that takes a big portion of the day, just basically dedicated research time. So that's that I'm up to date. Everyone's up to date on the latest techniques.
Right. Thank you. Let's move on to question number 2. It says, what made you interested in pursuing a career in data science? What were some of the challenges and opportunities you encountered as you progressed to the point where you are right now?
I can go first. So I actually didn't start out pursuing a career in data science. So, data science kind of became part of my role, part of my career path along the way. I started out as a biologist in my undergraduate degree, really, finding a love and a passion for kind of molecular biology first. That led me to, my graduate work at UW here, and primarily getting trained as a structural biologist and enzymologist. And it wasn't really until I started to do my postdoctoral work that it was very clear that data science and working with large data sets was becoming, really the future if you wanted to stay on the cutting edge of doing research and development, both in industry and academics. So this was, really kind of late 2000s. The human genome had just been sequenced. There was a huge amount of investment, both in government agencies to fund labs, as well as, startups, as well as pharmaceutical companies, in collecting big data for DNA sequencing. And that kind of kicked off a revolution of this kind of big data cloud service portion of being a laboratory scientist. And I think at that time, I didn't really have any formal training in data science, but as somebody in a technical field, of course, you're very exposed to that. You're doing a lot of analysis, a lot of data science type activities without any kind of formal training in that. So once I sort of realized that was really not only going to be very good for my career, but also would allow me with that skill set to do the science that I was really excited about doing in the future, that was really a moment where I felt like I really had to invest in sort of self-training, self-learning, becoming very knowledgeable in data science, creating models to help, accelerate the research that I was doing. So, that was something where, I found my way into data science to really augment my career and accelerate it. And I think some of the challenges there, there's a lot of them, certainly. And so I think there's maybe 2 I'll highlight. I think the first one was actually figuring out what I wanted to do for my career was the biggest challenge first. And I think like a lot of people, maybe that can take a long time. I really didn't identify that I wanted to use my background in protein engineering and design to create new tools and technologies for life science researchers up until I was doing my postdoctoral work. And so the first challenge is figuring out, what I really wanted to do and spend my time on for the rest of my career. And then the second challenge was, how do you actually make a career out of that interest or that passion? And that's, sometimes easier or, really harder than it sounds, because oftentimes as you progress through your career, it's not so much just about what you want to do with your career. You're also developing a lot of things in your life too. You may be starting a family, You maybe want to settle down in a particular part of the country to be close to relatives. You may be thinking about you want to retire someday. So you're trying to align your interest and your passion with what you want to do with your work, with all your other life considerations. And so that was really the second challenge, is how do I do that work I really want to do, but also align that with, kind of balancing the other needs and desires in my life. So so those are kind of the two of the biggest challenging things that I experienced. And I'm happy to go into more detail, but I think that is something that a lot of people experience too.
I can jump in next. I feel like I'm going to piggyback off of Mike, but just want to start with, I have an HR background more than IT. I just support and work with a lot of IT professionals. So I don't have a career in data science, but I feel like finding my career, I feel like, you learn there's no one right path to get to a certain career. So it's okay to, try a little bit here, try a little bit there, and find what's best for you. And same, I didn't think I was going to go into HR when I graduated college. I kind of jumped around to a lot of different positions that were like working in a hair salon. And then I was a fitness instructor. And so it came about in a wild, stumbled upon it kind of notion where an HR position opened at the place I was working at, and I applied and got in that way. I feel like some of the challenges I faced was very similar. Also, the job market, I feel like, can be really tough, especially right now. And, I remember when I was graduating college and applied to so many positions, and then you'd never hear back. And it just made it very I feel like my confidence went down, and it was demoralizing not to hear anything back or any feedback. So, something that I've taken into account now, being in an HR role, always respond, get back to the applicants as fast as possible. But I also, I feel like a way to kind of get in, once I was interested in HR, starting to pursue it, I joined some local organizations. There's a HR organization here in Madison that I partnered with, and got to learn more about the field, expand my knowledge on it, and create networks. I feel like was so important. I actually am in the job I am now due to a connection referring me to it. So I feel like any networks, connections, people you can meet and get to know could also lead to different opportunities. But I feel like, there are a couple pieces of, I feel like data is in every position. I feel like you have to have some sort of points of data. And of course, with recruitments, things with the program, surveys about how the program's going, feedback from the employees and the supervisors we work with are all things that we use and resources in order to advance and make our decisions going forward.
Thank you, Caroline. And can you tell us a little bit about what you see the rotators you're working with? What seems to interest you? What seems to challenge them? Particularly the ones that work on IT.
Yeah, I would say similar, when they're starting this program, no one knows they have ideas of what interests of IT they like, but a lot of times they're not 100% certain that's what they want to do. And that's why they come into this program. I'd say most of the people we have are, I'm not sure where I want to do in IT. So I wanted to come here and get that hands-on experience, apply my knowledge, and see what sticks the best. And I feel like going through these 4 different units, usually it's like a step oh, I figured that's actually not what I'm interested in, or front end versus back end. And it's a lot of discovery there, but I feel like a lot of their challenges is just that, kind of navigating that, trying to figure out what area of IT they want to go into, but also adapting to a lot of change because they are pivoting between 4 different units. So it's like starting a new job every 6 months, essentially. So having to pivot, also just, technology keeps changing. So what you maybe learned in college, once you're a year or 2 in the program, maybe things are different, or there's new technologies. And I know AI is very much coming about and slowly getting implemented into things. So I feel like there's a lot of adaptations and changes that they have to go through, which is challenging, to have to pivot a lot, but also I think a helpful skill to have in the future, because we all know technology changes, environments, companies change. So it's good to be able to adapt as that goes.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yeah.
What can you tell us, John?
Similar to what Carolyn and Mike said, my career path was not a straight line. It was actually kind of all over the place. My bachelor's degree was in history and theater. Seriously, I'm making that up. When I graduated, I wanted to teach high school history. There's one problem. After I graduated, no one was hiring. I was in Tennessee, and like literally, I had to work at the cashier just to pay bills. And so I went back to college and took a Chem 101 class. I hadn't taken any science classes in my bachelor's in history, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was just like this. It blew my mind. I ended up switching to biology because my mentor was a biology professor. And then from there, I applied to a PhD program and got to Tulane in the biomedical sciences. So about halfway through that, the program I was in, the program is multidisciplinary, but the lab I was in was a very pure biology lab. About halfway through, I went to my PhD advisor. I said, "Hey, look, program's a hobby. Can I integrate bioinformatics into this?" And she said, "Sure, you're on your own. You got to figure it out." I said, "Great." So that kind of was the start of like self-learning. And so my PhD, it was a bioinformatics aspect. I built a database for the bacteria we were studying, and also the wet lab portion I was running DNA and RNA extraction. As a postdoc, I was at LSU, and at the time they had a partnership with NVIDIA. This is right when AI and machine learning was taking off, and they offered free classes on how to program in CUDA. And so like my response was, "This is free, right? Okay, great, sign me up." And so that was what kind of got me going from bioinformatics to machine learning and data science. So I tell this just to reinforce the fact that learning data science, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat that. It is going to be a lot of work. You're gonna have a lot of challenges, but don't be discouraged. It is possible to do it. Also some of the challenges were a lot of self-learning. When I was learning, there really weren't too many resources. Now, great, there's a lot now. There's a lot more resources, which is great, and it's a huge benefit for everybody. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind that it's one of those kind of not high risk, basically high efforts, but high reward. Because I absolutely love what I'm doing now, and it's like I wouldn't trade it for anything. So.
Thanks. Right. My next question is about diversity. There's the lack of diversity might be a big problem in data science. In your opinion, what are some factors, resources, or experiences that have made you feel welcome or not welcome? And what changes do you think are needed to help attract and support a more diverse group of future data scientists?
That's a good question. Some of the challenge there's a lot of challenges in just the field of data science. In some aspects, it's still a developing field, and so meaning that everyone's still things are still shaking out. So some of the challenges with diversity aren't necessarily as established as in something like computer science or just like software engineering. That being said, though, that's not, there absolutely are there are diversity. There's a lot of diversity challenges here in the data science field. I'll be honest. I only have a few kind of general ideas. I don't have any good suggestions because that's something this is very important, but it's also something we need to address. Not just in the industry, but in industry, academia, and across the board. Mike or Carolyn, what are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in next. So. I mean, it's a fantastic question. I really appreciate you guys asking that. I guess the first thing I noticed when I came to the Bazaar yesterday was actually there was quite a bit of diversity. And so I think things have really changed quite a bit over the last, 15 or 20 years that I've, been in science and been in industry. And so I think it's important to kind of acknowledge the progress that's been made. And I think, the ML plus X community is a great example of kind of what can be achieved when that's sort of a pillar of your focus. But clearly, there's a lot more work to be done there. I sort of could break my answer into maybe two tangible areas where, I can provide some specific examples about, things that we're doing at Promega. So I kind of break it up into maybe larger, big initiatives and then maybe smaller individual initiatives. Some of the bigger things are, 6 years ago, Promega started a DEI task force. And this was, before I think a lot of, private companies, public companies were sort of adopting these aspects of their work and kind of ingraining them and institutionalizing them. And one of the big impacts that's had is that it's allowed from a leadership level, from the top down, to really set the tone and the culture to be, to have diversity and inclusivity part of the culture from the top down. And by creating this task force, what they did was actually bring in top leadership and really anybody else in the company, even interns, new employees, anyone that want to be part of this, to develop coursework, programming, events, resource groups for diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And so some of the things that I felt tangibly in my role that I think have been really impactful in not only making me feel welcome, but allowing me, tools to help other people that I'm either managing or I'm recruiting or hiring or I'm working with, feel included. One is actually this task force really changed how we actually did annual performance reviews and conversations with managers. And what that it did is incorporated DEI principles and questions into that review, which actually allowed a lot of my direct reports, that come from, all over the world and have very different backgrounds and life situations, to have a forum one-on-one with their manager so that they would have the ability in a very safe environment to communicate what they're going through, any concerns that they have, things that are working well for them. And then as a manager, I can, elevate those things to, larger leadership in the company. Another thing that we've done is we actually received training for hiring managers to enhance our recruitment and onboarding based on DEI principles too. And I think that's really raised consciousness about, when you see a resume or you're talking to a potential, new recruit on the phone, I think we're much more aware of employing those principles and being trained about how to take advantage of them in real world scenarios that have an impact on those people that are coming in and looking for those sorts of careers. Another specific example are employee resource groups that we've launched. These are self-directed, employee-driven groups that are all about growing DEI knowledge within the company. So examples of those that we have are Asian American and Pacific Islander support groups, health equity and employees with disability groups, as well as Latinx and Indigenous people and Mega Pride groups on campus there. And then we also have a DOORS scholarship that we call it for undergraduate students from underrepresented backgrounds so that they can receive mentorship with professionals in the biotech industry, both one-on-one and as part of groups and events throughout the year. So those are sort of examples of what I sort of see as big picture, top down, from institutionalized leadership and creating a culture and environment. And then just really quickly, the other aspect that I mentioned is sort of the small things that we can do. And this, I think, comes down to, personal responsibility as an individual in your role. You can help create that culture on a daily basis where, you're able to help people feel included, foster diversity. And one of the tools that I've been given to do that as a manager at Promega is we have been given additional time for caretaker leave to help accommodate people in all kinds of backgrounds and life situations. And so this is actually extra time off on top of vacation and personal time that employees can receive when they are caring for a family member, a spouse, a child, or a loved one with a disability or a life event, an illness, so that they can have extra time off to accommodate those challenges they're facing in their personal life. So that allows us to be very welcoming and accommodating to people from all kinds of backgrounds. And that's something where, as a manager, I have that tool available to me to help accommodate the work-life balance of people from those different backgrounds. So I think those are kind of two examples of ways in which we've actually, I think, employed some real solutions in these areas. And I think it's really important to kind of, allow that culture and that environment to be created for, diversity and inclusion to continue to be grown within industry as well as, academics as well.
I feel like with HR hat on, I'm like, I've got so many ideas, but I feel like some factors, resources, or experiences that can, help people feel welcomed, because I feel like just getting someone in the door, like you've hired them, but you also have to make them feel included so that they enjoy their time there and want to stay. And I feel like, of course, I feel like there's so many things in just that onboarding stage that can be really helpful. Like, asking people if they have any dietary restrictions in case you guys do any food events, or if they have any religious holidays that they celebrate that they'll need time off for. Do they need prayer time? Are there any accommodations, and making sure they're aware of what that accommodation process looks like. I always tell people that if you go for an accommodation, I don't hear what all the reasonings were or your health background or anything like that, just to make them feel more at ease that, their health information is private. I also feel like just sharing out, like, I think what everyone was saying, sharing out resources of what's available within the company, because, I feel like it's important to have a network, have a multiple people that people feel like they can go to. And also I feel like just, if someone's new, just chatting with them, checking in, introduce yourself, have them just be like, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, invite them to lunch. I know there's been times where I'm like, if I see someone sitting alone at the table, I'm like, well, I'll just sit with them. We can strike up a conversation. I feel like sometimes those little things of just making them feel welcome from the start. And also I feel like just meeting people where they're at, like everyone who's coming into a role has different backgrounds, experiences, life experiences, education, and just meeting them where they're at, like not expecting them to dive right in or, be super, like we don't want them to hit the wall running or whatever the saying is, but like ease them into it, have them have a welcoming onboarding experience, which I think can overall, help with retention as well. But I feel like, one thing that I was thinking of is with the job rotation program, we actually do a nationwide search for our program. So we have people from all across the U.S. that participate, which I think adds a new layer of, new perspectives, different backgrounds, not all just Wisconsin, UW systems. It's a variety of people. Some people in our program have a bachelor's, some have a master's, some have an associate's, and some have no education. They maybe have some certifications or did their own self-training, which I feel like leads into, for recruitments, for like, in general, I always feel like the more broad and the lower you can put your qualifications that still meet the job, the better, because there's transferable skills. Like I know we've all been talking about how communication was such a key piece. I feel like a lot of different jobs can have communication as a top tier. So rather than specifically saying like communication of technology, terminology, there could be another way to phrase that. So I feel like any way we can have recruitments that are a little more broad, a little more open, and have more flexibility for people to share those transferable skills. Because if anyone's like me, if I see a job posting and I don't meet every single qualification to the T, I won't apply. But if you leave it a little more open, put some examples of what you're thinking of, I feel like that's a way to bring more people in, have more people apply. And then when you interview them, you can pick up on some of those transferable skills that maybe they weren't certain about. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to move to my last question. Many of the people we're targeting for this panel are students, but there are also some working professionals who are considering a career shift into data science. And you already touched on some of those points, but to reiterate, what skills, internships, or experiences, in your opinion, are more essential to someone entering the job market?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like some skills, I know, again, we've touched on some of it, but just being adaptable, flexible to change, also being like willing to learn, because again, things will change, new technologies, new platforms and systems come out. So just being willing to learn, I feel like it's huge. And I feel like that's something I always look for when recruiting is like, even if they don't have all the knowledge needed, a lot of people, you can learn that stuff. It can be taught. And especially through this program, it's really shown that like, these employees are only in the program for 2 years, post-college, fresh done graduates, and they pick up so much stuff in just the span of 2 years that I'm like, as long as you're willing to learn and you're open-minded, they can pick up those things, they can build off of it. And I feel like that's super helpful. Sorry, I'm just peering at my notes. I feel like also, so like some of the people who join the program, they don't have a degree in specifically data science or IT, but if there's any certifications or any like LinkedIn learnings or trainings or classes that you can take to get some foundational knowledge on it, or joining any local organizations or clubs, I feel like that can really help just broaden and learn a little more, or conferences, just to expand that knowledge, even if you don't have that background but want to go into it, just so that you have a little bit of I don't have data science background, but here's what I do know. Here's, my initiative of what I took to get that knowledge. And I always feel like that speaks volumes when someone takes, their own initiative, their own time to really show like, hey, yeah, I'm really interested in it because I went to all these conferences, I did trainings, I went for a certification. So again, that's not a qualification for our program because we don't require a degree specifically in that. Because, people change their minds, things happen, and it's okay to try something different. And of course, just networking. I feel like if you know of anyone in the field or have any professors or colleagues that are in that field, just talking with them to hear more about, similar to what we're doing, hear more about their experiences, how they got into that field, what they would recommend to, and who knows, they could be a connection or a reference in the future that can help when you're job searching.
What can you tell us, Mike or John?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a ton of advice out there about what kind of skills you need, and it's so circumstantial to the individual and the path that they're on. It's easy to give a very general answer and not be too helpful in that area. But I agree with everything Carolyn just said. And I think if there's something that I wanted to say that would be something that I don't often see as recommended advice is that, something that we look for, or one of the biggest things, is actually demonstrated outcomes for people that are entering the job market on your resume or on your CV. So Steve Jobs had this really great quote that real artists ship. And what he was referring to is the fact that everyone has ideas, but real artists deliver on them. And so we work in a very technical field. I'm surrounded by incredibly smart people. We have tons of ideas, but the real differentiating factor that allows people to rise above and differentiate themselves are the people that are delivering on projects, that are completing projects, that are publishing, that have GitHub repos full of code that they can share, that are going out and being leaders and creating new groups that have actionable outcomes associated with them. So I think that's something where having technical skills, having a lot of interpersonal skills are in a lot of ways table stakes for competing for careers nowadays. So I think they're absolutely essential and important. But you need to be able to demonstrate that you can sort of get across the finish line and create value from that skill set and from that training.
Very similar to what both Carolyn and Mike said. Every job is going to have different requirements. Every hiring manager is going to have a different idea. But just what is absolutely critical is being an active participant in projects with demonstrated outcomes or actionable outcomes. I would actually rank that higher even than certifications and classwork. The reason is just because at a very simple level, if I'm reviewing an applicant and I see that they work for this company, that's from start to finish, they developed this product that saved the company like X amount of dollars versus another candidate that had a certification, I'm going to go with the first candidate because they may not have that certification, but they've been working in the environment. They're familiar with kind of what the stakes are in a given project. But that being said, certifications are very useful, especially, and so that's not to bash certifications, not to bash classwork. And it's what I would say is, as well as it's very important to start your GitLab or Git repository, so you can basically have a record of your work. And even simple projects that you do, you never know that still demonstrates that you have expert knowledge in that area, and you have actual knowledge in that area of how to apply just the raw skills, kind of go from skills to knowledge to product, whatever that product may be.
Cool. Thank you. So Caroline, when you're placing those people in the IT track, what do you see the hosting units? What are they asking you for? What is if you can summarize it in a few items, what are those things that they're looking for for your rotators?
Like when a rotator joins a unit, like what?
Right, like when the IT rotators are looking for a hosting unit, the hosting units tell you, we're looking for this. Do you see a factor?
Yeah, I feel like similar to some of the things I was touching of being, flexible and adaptable, especially, joining a new unit. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot with the onboarding. So I feel like a lot of times they also want someone who, there's a balance of like when you're stuck on a problem to reach out and ask for help and ask questions, but also doing a little bit of your own independent research. So being a little self-sufficient, but don't get stuck on it too long that you're afraid to ask for questions. I feel like the main goal is someone that they just feel like has passion or interest for the work. So that way they're enjoying their time there and that they can share out a variety of work to that person. And a lot of times when we have these employees go to these units, sometimes they're able to adapt the work a little bit based off of that employee's interests. But a lot of times it's just the more like communication skills I feel like are always huge, because I think every single employee that I've had go to an IT unit, they have to have some sort of communication or customer service with either within the team, or they have to present to vendors or to leadership, or they have to work with the customers who are actually experiencing the technical issues. So I feel like having that customer service, good communication is such an important skill as well, because I don't think any unit has ever told me they need, this employee must have like this knowledge with this specific platform or system or this process. It's never that. It is more of these like general skills of communication, passion for the work and willingness to learn, open-minded, able to shift and pivot, because no projects, no work, I feel like is always straight line and seamless. So being able to pivot if things happen or if abrupt changes or issues arise, they're able to move around that.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of my scripted questions, and we have a whole bunch of people that are probably entertaining questions for the panel. So why don't we open the floor for questions?
I'll try and do the context quicker. My colleague and I are from the college. Our purpose is getting students jobs. The job market has shifted. This is a conference talking about AI and machine learning. I was looking for any mention at all from you regarding AI, which is where my questions are going to be centered. So as I've said, going through, let's say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they say their outlook for the next 10 years is, data analysts look good for jobs. Software developers look good for jobs. Cybersecurity look good for jobs. But at the end of their report, they also make mention that, our data is based upon historical data, right? So they don't have the ability to do forward analysis, especially on, let's say, a technology that shifts in a cross-cutting manner across industries. So while the numbers say we're looking at the job outlook looks good, they did hedge their analysis on perhaps it might not look so good because we don't really know what to expect yet. So with what you do there, since we're trying to change at our school, trying to really just react to what the industry is doing, what this technology is doing, we have our own data analysis, data processing, data analytics program at college, and we need to find jobs for our students there as well. So AI use, from your perspective, where you're at, I know it's different in different industries. Do you see this as a supplementary use? You can use it for email, help you for meetings. You might do it for brainstorming. Do you see it automating workflows, as I have some colleagues out in the field doing, or are you just exploring things currently? Second question has to do with AI role use. Do you see this impacting entry-level analysts, maybe leveling their skills up to be able to perform more? Or do you see AI being used by high-level analysts, which would address maybe the busy work, low-level work that they don't necessarily have to do because they could use the AI to do this small data cleaning, small data collating, analysis, that kind of stuff. And then finally, I'm just looking for your advice for, some of our students that are going to be looking for jobs. So those three things. That's what I was asking.
Happy to start, and I hope I hit all the questions, but I feel like, at least with my work in AI, I feel like it's definitely like, at the university, we have the Microsoft Copilot that's, welcome for all staff to use if needed. And I feel like I'm still, myself personally, I'm still newer to it. So I've tried using it for more brainstorming, making sure it's worded right, or coming up with an idea of a template. But within, like, I feel like with recruitment, AI is a very prevalent tool where, applicants might use it as a way to write their resume or a way to answer interview questions. With our recruitment process, we do send out the interview questions in advance by a day to the applicant, so they have time to digest and come up with the best answer they can. So AI, I'm sure, is definitely used in a lot of that. And sometimes we hear very similar answers. So it's definitely a bit of work on our end to make sure that it's actually applicable to the applicant. They're being truthful about their experience, that maybe they just used a templated answer to come up with it. In the AI for the IT employees, I feel like they use AI maybe a little bit more. They're definitely more familiar with it because we have a lot of early career professionals. And I feel like some of them, with like a software development role, some of them are using it for coding, but they're not using it so much to like write the code, but maybe catch there's a mistake, I don't know why, or this code seems wrong, what's with it? So more of a fact checker, or a way to reduce time / not needing to have somebody sit through and comb through the code with you together. So maybe more of a like time saving process. But the main thing is that, and I've talked with a lot of their IT supervisors, is that we want to make sure they understand what the code is, why they're doing, like what makes sense and how does that work. And I know it's not specific to data science, but I feel like it can, to me, I think of AI more as like a helpful tool, but shouldn't do all the work, because I think it's important to know why you're doing what you're doing, or why it's entered this way, or why is the process this way, to make sure that maybe you can use the AI once, but then going forward, maybe you don't need it because you understand it better. I feel like you might have had another question that I missed, but I'll let the others speak up too.
I can jump in. So to answer your first question, that's a great one. About just looking for what type of jobs will be available, because AI is a key concern. That's actually one of the tools that I work directly with every day is large language models like ChatGPT, the DeepSeek, which just made the news, and Gemini, all the tools like that. The best way I can kind of, I guess, answer that is actually at a conference a couple years back, and there's a physician who was speaking, and his response to questions is AI going to replace doctors? His response was, AI won't replace doctors, but doctors who don't use AI will get replaced. Meaning that AI is very powerful. There's a lot it can do, but it can't really take. It's not like a silver bullet magic cure all that will fix everything. As far as like, do you see it for its entry level versus higher level jobs? That's another kind of tough question to answer. Because one of the key things is that AI is still rapidly changing. It's changing even now. I would say that for entry level, it's probably going to take some entry level jobs. I'm just be honest. But it's not going to be something that's going to take all jobs. In fact, we're kind of seeing this now. Like some companies that decided to, if you may have read in the news, decided to fire all their software engineers and then go to AI. That's not a good idea, because a lot of times those companies end up hiring the software engineers back, because AI it's a good tool. It can be used as an assistant. Or as something as its assistant to help you out, but it's not necessarily going to take. It's not going to take the place of existing roles. in a couple of job interviews I've been in recently, actually the interviewers even acknowledge when the questions they're asking, they're actually very conceptual. They weren't very specific because they didn't acknowledge, look, if you want the code, you can just use ChatGPT and write the code on this. And so, but they're more interested in like the conceptually, do you conceptually understand what this means? And so this is the kind of answer to both question 2 and 3, and that I would highly recommend being familiar with AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, those. Use them as much as you can because they're not going away. I mean, it's not like this. Anyone who says like AI is just going to disappear, it's not. I mean, it's the cat's out of the bag. And the best thing you can do at any level, whether it's entry level, senior level, is just look at this as a tool that is useful, that can help you. And the more you know about it, the better at using it, the better off you're going to be in your professional career.
Yeah, so thanks for that, really great context and set of questions there. And I think there's a lot of things we could say, and I appreciate John and Carolyn's answers. So I absolutely think AI is fundamentally transforming probably every industry right now, whether people realize it or not. I think we're a bit fortunate in the data science field to be at the front lines of that transition, about seeing it coming and seeing it change in real time. So I absolutely believe that it's going to be essential moving forward for almost any role you could possibly imagine in the future to have that skill set. So in terms of using AI in current roles, I mean, I know at Promega, we have about 2,000 employees. 1,600 of them have enterprise licenses for ChatGPT and regularly use it on a daily basis. And that is totally different from even 3 years ago. So you can already see, and those people are all kinds of different roles: manufacturing, sales, HR, scientific roles, non-technical roles, management, leadership. Every job has been fundamentally transformed there. In terms of, I guess, advice for students, I think there's probably maybe 2 areas to break it out. One is, how do you compete to get a job in the first place? And then the second question is, once you have that job, how can you compete effectively and be the best version of yourself in that role? So there's different skill sets you need to get a job versus the skill set you need to keep that job and be competitive and to do very well. So in terms of getting the job, I mean, I think you need to demonstrate proficiency and familiarity with AI tools, full stop, especially if you're in a data science career. I think you kind of need the softer side of AI, using it in everyday, work for processing documents, writing email. But then I think the technical work in data science, the ability, if you think it's necessary for your career path, to understand those models, as John talked about, conceptualize them, understand what they're doing, and possibly even work with them, train your own models, or apply those models in a business setting, in a career setting, are going to be absolutely essential skills that you need to, I think, to know how to do really well to be competitive in the job market. It's an interesting question about sort of the entry-level analyst versus the high-level analyst, because I think there's a study recently where they looked at the effects of using large language models in people's work. And what they found was that people that had high expertise in their field, sort of high-level analysts, when you gave them the ability to use, LLMs to do coding, to do work, their work actually accelerated and their expertise increased. But what they actually found was in the entry-level roles, the people that were really reliant on the LLMs, their skills actually went down. And that was because, they really didn't have decades of knowledge, decades of experience about solving problems, conceptualizing things, creating outcomes on projects, and getting through all of the tough parts of learning and failing. And so if you just relied on using LLMs to do all of those skills, they kind of atrophy. So if you haven't really built those up early in your career, I think it can be problematic. So I absolutely agree with the sentiment that to be very careful about that risk in being over-reliant on those tools, to also take the opportunity to not only use them, but then, take the time to learn, to grow your skill set, and to not be 100% reliant on them, whatever your role is, whether it's writing code or, doing presentations, management. And so I think your final question was advice for students about, heading into the job market. I think the biggest thing you can do is networking. And that's not a new tool available to people. I think it's kind of a really obvious piece of advice, but I think maybe what's different is that people often see networking, especially in the early part of their career, as a transaction. They're approaching people in the industry or in certain roles, and they're really just trying to get a job. They're really just trying to figure out, can you, give me a, a recommendation? But what they don't realize is that what a network actually is basically an expert panel of mentors for you that you can rely on and you can leverage to guide you, to give you advice. And, because you're going to be going into all kinds of different roles, there's no one size fits all skill set. But given your particular role, your life situation, you may want to know, is this certificate program right for me? Should I take this boot camp? What skill set do I need to be in your role versus another person's role? And so if you built up that professional network, you may think, I'm going to go take this boot camp on AI, and that's really going to prepare me for a career in data science. But you might talk to 10 professionals in the field, and they might say, look, that would be great, but what we really need are people that have certificates in Amazon cloud computing. So you might have spent your time and resources going through a program for, AI in some specific way. But actually a more strategic move for you might have been training on Amazon cloud services, and that would help you compete for those jobs and do really well for them in those roles. So I think in terms of the advice for people entering that job market, I think it's building that network of experts that can help guide your career, whether you're in the early phase of your career, whether you've just landed a job, whether you're trying to get a promotion, whether you're trying to move careers once you're in the industry. It's a continual source of expertise that you can lean on. And then eventually, once you've built your own skill set, look behind you of the people that are coming up and offer that mentorship for them, build a network with them and help you there.
Those are great points, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do I have another question?
I'll have infinite questions if you let me, but I'll try and keep it limited. First question for Caroline directly. Your program is through UW-Madison. Who's
Yeah.
eligible for it, and how do they apply to it?
Yeah. So we do basically, it's a very cyclical cycle and program, but program itself is 2 years. We always do a recruitment every fall. So like this September would be when we would post, recruit, and then the cohort would begin the following July. So like last fall, we did a recruitment for cohort 6, and then they're going to start this coming July for orientation. So a lot of the qualifications are on the job posting, but they're very more generalized again, because they're tailored towards early career professionals. So those who have just completed their education, or those who you maybe have a year or 2 under your belt. But in order to go through this program and cohort, we do a lot of like early career professional general skills, communication, presentations, project management. So sometimes people who are further in their career would not benefit from that stuff as much, because you have some of that more experience with it. But yeah, a lot of the IT qualifications, I should say, we have HR and finance track as well, but a lot of them again are fairly open-ended.
So is it for UW-Madison alumni specifically, or is it open to more general public?
Open general public. We do a nationwide search, so we have people from like California, Tennessee, Texas, Maine, all over the place that come here. So no, you do not have to be UW-Madison alumni.
Okay, thank you. I should have introduced myself first. I'm Mike Black. I'm from UW-Platteville. I teach stats and data science there. I appreciate these panels. This is the first time I've made it in person. So then to Michael and John and Caroline, you could answer as well. Michael, 10 years you're saying into the career. John didn't necessarily mention. John, you specifically introduced yourself as a data engineer. This is a secondary question on difference between data scientist, data engineer, data analyst. Do you see a differentiation and so on? But before that, even more interesting to me, I've talked with several, my students are undergrad level degree seekers, and most of them need a job right away, but I've also talked with different people at conferences. I appreciated, Michael, you mentioning your time is split between management and lab. One of the people I talked with, her whole thing was she spent about half her career trying to avoid becoming a manager. To people just starting out, what does a path look like? Because I know in business, we tend to think of a path as leading into management, project manager, if nothing else. So how do you distinguish those roles? How do you see the evolvement of your career? So those are the two things I would like comments on. from any of you, particularly Michael and John. And then on the other one, any three of you, what's the difference between the different titles that people might apply? So thank you.
Well, I can get started, to answer your first question, there's a lot of overlap between data scientist, engineer, and analyst. Some of it, we'll talk about what I do in the lab in a moment, but just kind of I do the job postings, kind of one for, if you look, say one list is data engineer and data scientist, like at different companies, they may be the same, maybe they may be different. The same thing with analysts as well. Analyst usually is a more narrative scope, but again, it just depends. Actually, at the lab, I actually started as a data scientist, and about a year and a half back, I transitioned as a data engineer. As a data scientist, it was a lot of what I did as a data scientist was high level conceptual, but also so it kind of takes from high level conceptual to building out the codes, establishing experimental hypothesis, and then testing that hypothesis. As a data engineer, a lot of what I'm doing, and now again, there's overlap because with this, but as a data engineer tends to be kind of almost like the flip side or the back end. The data scientists will come in their lab, will come to me and say, here's my project, here's what I'm working on, here's the hypothesis. I need these resources. Can you help me with this out? Because now those resources could be computing resources. It could be like they're trying to process it. They need either a custom or novel algorithm to process this data, simply because we don't have the computing resources available. But I guess so. I would say data engineers is usually more focused on kind of coding, low-level tasks. Data scientists tends to be more methods and hypothesis testing. But again, there's a lot of overlap, and analyst tends to be a specific part addressing or handling a specific part of an overall project or experiment. For a typical path, that's another great one. Most of my careers, actually all my careers so far has been in academia. So the career paths in academia are a little bit different than in industry. So let me actually hand off to Mike and Carolyn to from you.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think I'll just, kind of build off what John said, because I think I totally agree with the way he kind of differentiated some of those roles. I mean, in our environment, maybe a difference between a data engineer and a data scientist would be the data engineer is, someone who's more on the infrastructure end of working with large data, preparing those data sets. When they're coming in or they're going out, they are creating the databases, they are cleaning the data, working with them. And then the data scientists are the ones that are typically involved with the more conceptual model building based on that data, providing insights and actionable outcomes from that sort of, analysis. So, but those titles are very fuzzy, and I could appreciate why it's very confusing for people, certainly entering into the field, let alone people that are already in the field, not being able to provide real clear distinctions there. So, I guess a typical path, and I can speak about maybe the biotech industry specifically, I think it's I say the well-worn path that I think is sort of the default is that, entry-level people are coming in typically as experimentalists, as technical contributors, individual contributors. Oftentimes that leads to more responsibilities as they're able to start leading projects, perhaps managing small teams of people. And then that may grow into, entirely management leadership roles of leading larger groups or departments. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think you mentioned, having an experience that you shared with somebody who was trying to avoid management entirely. And I think that's very common, because I think what often happens is people get very motivated to climb the career ladder. And oftentimes what they don't realize is that as you move out of the technical role and into more of a management or leadership role, that's a completely different skill set. It's a very different day-to-day experience for you as a person. You will go through different kinds of stress. You will go through different kinds of responsibilities. And if you're not prepared for that, or, that's not something you really like, oftentimes people get, accelerated into these management or leadership roles, and they find out they really don't like them. And so they try to find their way back to the technical roles. So that's a very common thing to do. So what I would say is, if you see yourself going down that path, try to understand what kind of, work really makes you happy. What kinds of things do you see yourself doing, and where do you see yourself contributing? maybe you do want to stay in a technical role your entire career, and that's great. I think we need people to be on both sides of that coin. And so the sooner you can understand that about yourself and where you want to go, the better, because I think you'll be able to hopefully find jobs where you can ask those questions maybe coming in are, when you're interviewing, what are the typical, trajectories, career paths, starting from this entry-level position? Will I be expected to manage right away? Do I have to manage in order to move up at this company? And I know, speaking from the places that I've been in, oftentimes there's sort of a hybrid role, and people can kind of define that to a certain extent themselves. At companies sometimes more so than others. At Promega right now, we are, very much in control of our own destiny. We have people that really decide that they're going to, be in a technical role for 30 years. And other people say, I'm done doing bench work. I'm done doing, the technical work. I really just want to lead projects, manage people. That's really where my passion is. And then somewhere in between. So I think you can hopefully find a role or a job or a place where you can help define that, find that flexibility to try it out if you want to, and, really find a way that, really ends up making you really happy in your career.
Thank you for those answers. Do you have any questions, any more questions from the floor? While you come up with a new question, I do have one of my own. I noticed from both John and Mike that you didn't start as data scientist. You're both biology and biochemistry, correct? And then you learned what you needed to do to find data science into your career. Now we have a lot of people now going directly into data science. And how do you see that tension between expertise in a particular field that requires data science and this new professional who don't have that expertise yet, but they're experts in data science? How do you see that tension resolving? If there is any tension, I don't know if there is.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably, if I had to guess, more common that, with data science training, you're often applying that to a particular field or a particular role. And it's not just for the sake of doing data science. If you're working for a business, if you're working for a company, they have certain strategic objectives. They may have certain products, and your data science technical skills are coming to bear on launching those products, serving customers, whatever that role tends to be in. You're really applying those skills rather than just, using them for the sake of using them. So I do think that over the trajectory of an entire career, you may find yourself at several different companies that have different product lines, different areas of focus. You may work on a software company, then you may work at a manufacturing company, then you may work at a, who knows kind of company. And in every one of those roles, you're going to be applying those skills to different fields or different, specializations. But I think there's a lot of generality involved too, because I think the data science tends to look at a boilerplate level very similar. It's often kind of the same things that we always talk about in data science about, bringing the data in, collecting it responsibly, making sure it's complete, cleaning it, preparing it for models, training the models. But the actual insights out of those models and that data are maybe applying them to different fields of study, different kinds of businesses. So I think there is commonalities, but I think maybe the expectation in your career is to say, I'm really looking forward to applying these to interesting jobs and interesting questions that help also create value for companies.
Thank you. That's a great question. You're right. There can be some tension. But I think my take would be like someone went through a data science program and versus someone who started in a different field then went to data science. I would my take would be that there really shouldn't be tension because everyone can learn something. If you're working on a project, no one's going to know everything, and so I guess if there is tension, then the best solution would be to just have as much communication as possible, and just recognizing that everyone's going to have different skill sets. At every stage of their career, they're just sort of skill sets, and if you work together, learn from each other, everyone's going to win. The project's going to get done faster, and also you're going to be that much better and that much better candidate for the next position or what inside or outside that company.
Well, I have a hidden question here, a follow-up from my last one. There are lots of data science resources out there, from intensive boot camps to certifications to formal advanced degrees. And are certifications and boot camps good option for people who hope to move from a specific field into data science? What are the general educational requirements that you think are good for someone wanting to do that shift, if you know any?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question, and I sort of see, there's maybe two paths there. So one is, formal degree programs that I think are a bigger investment in time and resources, financially. And so people may not always be able to take advantage of those sorts of things. They may not be able to spend nights and weekends getting a degree or have the financial resources to pursue a degree career, or maybe a new degree if they're switching fields for several years to make that career change. And I'm obviously super impressed by people that are able to do that. But I think things like certificates and boot camps can be very strategically applied, because I do think they're valuable. And, I kind of experienced this personally where, when I was coming out of my graduate work and my postdoctoral work, I knew that I wanted to transition into industry, but I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what those jobs looked like. I didn't know how to get those jobs. I didn't know what people did or, anything like that. So I did a certificate program in clinical trials management, and that actually helped me not only get my first role at a startup company that was going into clinical trials with a new diagnostic technology they were developing, but as a project leader within that startup, I was much more effective in that role because of the certificate program, because I knew what the company was going through and what the priorities were going into clinical trials. And so I could lead the projects we were going through towards things that specifically helped us be successful with the clinical trial. So that was a case where the certificate program not only helped me get the job, but helped me be more effective in the role. And what I would say is, if you're in a position where, you feel like certificate programs and boot camps are something that are really going to help your career, be strategic about it. Leverage your network and go ask people, should I do a boot camp in ML? Should I do a boot camp in cloud services? Should I do a boot camp in backend, database infrastructure? What's actually going to help me? And so you can be, much more effective in what you spend your time and your financial resources on to prepare yourself for a career. And then, of course, what's really going to help you in that role.
I just reiterate what Mike said, and just kind of building what he said earlier, that don't take a boot camp just because it sounds good, or don't take a boot camp or a certification just because it seems like maybe I might need that. I'll just be honest with you, that's the wrong approach. Don't do that. Take time, think long and hard, and kind of think about what do you want in your, first of all, kind of what do you want in your career, what do you want your career to be, and then once you have an idea of what your career is going to be, then from there kind of say, okay, I need this certification, I need this certification, this boot camp would be okay, so I'll get to it if I can. And basically, as simple as it sounds, just make a plan. Don't just jump in and say, I'm gonna do this. Just have a plan, make a plan, stick to the plan, update as needed, but stick to that plan.
The only thing I was going to build off of both of what you were saying is just, if there's like a certain title or certain company that you're interested in, you could look at the job postings and see, do any of them have a requirement? What is it? Oh, if I want to go into this type of role, I do need a degree in it. Or if I want to go into this, these are the certifications they require. And I feel like don't hurt to look on LinkedIn too, and just look around, or any social medias that you can see, like, oh, this person's in this company, they do have that certification. So I feel like there's some research you could do on your own to see, but I completely agree with them. I wouldn't just take any certification or boot camp just because, if there's a specific path you're thinking of doing, just to keep, your financials all safe and secure, I would say that would be a good way. Or again, reach out to mentors of people who are in this field and just see their perspective too.
Thanks, Carolyn. We're getting close to the top of the hour. We have time for one more question.
So in a more traditional IT field, when interviewing or when preparing for it, one of the ways that potential employee could show their passions, like a home lab. So the things they do at home to play around, they got a little server, they got a little router. For data science, whether it's in HR or for those who are working in the data sciences and data engineering, what's the equivalent of a home lab? What's the personal passion project that you would be like, wow, that would help you identify the right person for a role?
Thank you for the question. I know, speaking specifically to my industry, for people that have a data science background or going to be in a technical role doing, some sort of computational biology or chemistry. I think those passion projects end up being things that end up on a GitHub repository usually. And oftentimes when we're interviewing those candidates, we're asking them, what are some example projects on your GitHub that you can point us to that is something maybe that was part of the professional role project they completed, or maybe it really was a passion project. And oftentimes, you want those to be related to the role in some meaningful way. This is creating a new tool to engineer proteins or creating a new tool to dock a chemistry into a enzyme active site. That's very specific to our field. But I think the maybe important part isn't necessarily so much the content, but I think it's kind of the first part of your question, which is we're looking for enthusiasm. We're looking for self-initiative to be passionate about something and be motivated to go out and actually complete it and show that project off. That's obviously a much more important skill set for us than having a very specific project that you completed that is somehow applicable. That's nice if it happens, but what we recognize is that when a person comes into a new role at an entry-level job, they're immediately going to be put on new projects. They're immediately going to be working on new things. And so what they were doing before that is often less important than the enthusiasm, their ability to grow, their ability to solve problems and be self-motivated, self-driven, have a motivation to be self-taught or continuously learn things. Those are the skills that end up being valuable to us over a 20 or 30-year career. And those are what we're prioritizing over, whether you had a specific kind of project completed.
I was going to agree with Mike too. I feel like a lot of times when I'm looking at like applicant materials and they're expressing their passion, I feel like sometimes it's not even that they had a specific, this is what I did at home, or this is a class that I took. Sometimes it's just like, this is where my passion for IT stemmed from, is because of this. Or when I was growing up, I always liked playing on computers, or this is where my passion stemmed from. Or even just like, I've had a lot of applicants who maybe have like a degree in, like there's one that has a degree in criminal justice. And it's like, he explained, like, I can see overlaps of how my past experience and working with people, working through difficult problems, and it fed into my interest in the IT because XYZ. So I don't always specifically need like a concrete, here's something I did, but even just like a background of where their interest started or what caused them to want to pursue this, I think is a way to also show your enthusiasm and passion.
Just honestly, echo what Mike and Carolyn said. Just passion is very important. It's throughout the entire interview process. Interviewing is a skill, but basically just it's really important. Just show that you're passionate. Show that you really like your project that you built. To show that you're really passionate about data science. Geek out, nerd out. Seriously, I'm being serious now. Absolutely do that in any job interview. The only having GitLab again, that's not just a GitLab account or a Git or GitHub, but that you're actively maintaining. Because first thing they're going to do is look, okay, is this something you posted to once? Where they're going to employers going to look and say, well, this is something that you're actively working on. You're constantly, even if it's different project, you're constantly updating it using your Git repository that you're working on. And just very, very quickly, Kaggle and other competitions. Those are good as well. Kind of like it's not exactly the same as like a home lab, but it's similar because that's like it's a project that everyone's working on. And you don't necessarily win. You can say like I ranked this high, which kind of shows that you took it seriously. You started from start to finish, and this is something that you're passionate about.
Thank you, John. And with that, it's 11:30. I want you to join me in thanking our speakers, getting a good round of applause.